Hello everyone, this is Lukenator here, and today I have the deck profile analysis for the psy-frame deck that I posted a couple of days ago. So I'm going to be going over every choice I made, why I made that choice, and I'll be showing you guys a few cool things you can do with the deck, and hopefully you will learn a thing or two so you can build your psy-frame deck. So the 3 driver, this is considered standard. Basically, if you run any less, you run a greater chance of running out. And even if these are in hands, they're not. It's not too bad because you can discard them for a few things. So it's never too bad in hand, and it's nice just to have the extra security of having 3. So next up we have 3 alpha. This is the second best gear. So again, this is standard. Thing I like to do with this is if your opponent's going first, so you can drop this on their first normal summon, then get the search for field spell or an overload or something. That way you can set up a lot easier on your turn. And if you have a method of returning the alpha and the driver that you summoned from banished to your hand, or if you have a psychic field zone to summon a Zeta, it's really good because you get a lot of plus out of it. So, yep, 3 of those are standard. And then the 3 beta. This deck can take a lot of damage very easily, very quickly. That's because you can't put monsters out onto the board very easily. And you usually want to keep your monsters banished so that you can actually negate things. Because then you can't use any other effects because, of course, you can't control any monsters to use them. So, yeah. And this just reduces the damage. Unfortunate thing with beta is if the monster that was attacking isn't destroyed, you don't end the battle phase, and because it doesn't negate the attack, that monster that was attacking can replay into your beta or driver. So that's unfortunate. Now, the best gear is Gamma, which you run 3 of course. Everything in this game is monster effects, so this is really good. Compare it to Effect Veiler, it's the same, but you negate it wherever it is, regardless of, well, because with Effect Veiler can only do it on the field. And it also destroys and you get a synchro, so relative to Effect Veiler it's a +2, because this is +1, Effect Veiler is -1. So yeah, if you think Effect Veiler is good, Gamma is just ridiculous. And then right now, 3 Delta is considered standard. Reason being is because of Pendulums and Monarchs, and just everything is running spell cards right now. For example, this deck I'm only running 3 traps, and most of the decks run very few traps. So yeah, Delta is quite good. You don't run any Epsilon. The only matchup where it is kind of a consideration is Cosmo right now, because you can negate the Call of the Haunted and the Cosmo Joes, but they can play around you quite easily. So also everything is counter traps, which you can't negate of course because of spell speeds. So that's why I don't run Epsilon. You could side it against Cosmo, but it takes a lot of space. Then I'm running 3 card D. This card is really good in this deck because it's +1, and the deck itself is based around card advantage. It's a very card advantage focused deck. So it each gear, if it successfully resolves and you have field spell on board, it's a +1. So if you play field spell and 2 gears, you go +1 overall, which is really good. So yeah, also the main reason you play this is because you don't special summon during your own turn very much, so you can afford to pay the cost. However, when I was putting this in the deck, I kind of didn't like it because, like, okay, I play this, I can no longer do any negating, which I really didn't like at the time, but after playing it like once and drawing this card and seeing how good it was, I definitely would run 3. Also, a thing to remember that you can negate stuff during your own turn. I can picture scenarios where you would just forget, but yeah, definitely remember when you can always negate stuff. So that's monsters. Then I'm running 3 Duality, basically because Duality and Kakadi together is really good. If you're running Kakadi, run Duality and 3 of each. It's it's what you do. It's a really good combination. Like duality into Kakadi is a very solid opening. It gives you so many options. So yeah, and then the psyframe circuit, you definitely need 3. It's just the entire engine of the deck basically. A thing that people often forget is the discard effect if they're not familiar with psyframes. So if you're basting another monster with a psyframe, you can discard a psyframe from your hand, increase your basting monster's attack by the discarded one, which is really good. A lot of people forget about it, and they could just blindly run into it. Even really duelists I consider really highly have run into it and just completely forgotten about the effect. So yeah, also with psyframe driver, even if this card's in hand, you can discard it with circuit. That'll bump your Zeta to 5,000 and your Omega to 5,300. That's more than anything in the game apart from Despots. So yeah, it's a lot of attack points. Then there's little mini draw engine combination card collection, I guess. I don't know what to call it. I mentioned in my previous video. The 2 terraforming, 2 chicken game, and the 2 upstart. Now, this minimizes the amount of dead cards you have. Because you need to run terraforming, you need to run this. Just because circuit is so key. Even though you can search with alpha, you usually want to be going first with the deck. Just because you get so much more setup potential, and then you can just prevent your opponent putting cards out on board. As another thing I noticed by playing this deck, if you go first, you have a much better chance of winning. Whereas if you're going second, you are at a pretty big disadvantage, actually. So, the terraforming gives you the search. But if you have chicken game, psyframe circuit, and terraforming in your hand, for example, or 2 terraformings, you essentially have a -1 in hand because you just have a terraforming or a psyframe circuit sitting there doing nothing. So that's bad. We don't like that, especially in a very +1, -1 orientated deck. So that's why you run the chicken game, so you can go, if you have a circuit and a terraforming, you can go terraforming chicken game, play chicken game, draw a card, and play circuit. So that way you don't lose out on card advantage. But the problem with chicken game is if you have a circuit already on board, and you draw chicken game, or a terraforming for that matter, you can't draw for free, so you have to kill your circuit just to draw a card, which is really bad. Unless you have 2 of these stuck in hand, and you know your opponent doesn't have a way to kill the circuit, it's usually a bad idea to activate over it just to draw cards. Like, it's too bad. Going minus is bad in this deck. The upstart is basically the 3rd chicken game in terraforming, but you can always use it. So that's why I quite like it. It's never dead, the upstart, and it just increases consistency. And with all the draw power, you're basically running a 32 card deck, or 31. It's quite small, which is really good because we need to buff the consistency of this thing. I don't like the consistency at the moment. So yeah, and then the 2 psychic path, 2 psychic villain, I group them together because they return drivers, basically. You do need some method of returning your banished drivers to somewhere you can use them, so hand or graveyard. Both of these cards have 1v games, definitely. However, both of those cards have also lost me games just by clogging in hand and me being unable to use them. For example, if you open the field spell and these, and your opponent doesn't kill the field spell, these cards are dead, essentially. Simply because you won't have anything banished. So yeah, they can lose your games that way just by clogging, but it doesn't happen too often. But when it does happen, you really feel it, and it really hurts. So you definitely need some form of return. To be honest, you only need 2 Psychic Fill Zone, but you do need 2 Psychic Fill Zone as a minimum. Then I'm also running the 1 Emergency Teleport, as I mentioned. It is a tech. You can use this to set up for the Psychic Fill Zone and the Psychic Path. So if you activate this during your opponent's end phase, then you essentially just banish 1 psyframe gear from your deck. So if you couple that with Psychic Path, that's essentially a search. That's good. Searching cards is good. We all like that. And then with Psychic Fill Zone, good players, they will only let you banish the drivers. They won't let you banish the gears. So they'll just destroy them when they're on the field. For example, if you don't have field spell, you summon a thing, they will attack the gear and not attack the driver, or destroy it with effect or something. So that way you just have drivers banished and gears going to graveyard. So this lets you set this up quite nicely. You can also use this as a cost just for the overload, which is one of the reasons I think people are running Epsilon. If you're running Epsilon just for as a cost, I would definitely recommend the emergency teleport instead. And then I'm running 2 Twin Twisters because you can afford to pay the cost. There's a bunch of things you can discard. You can discard drivers, you can discard deltas if they're dead, you can discard gammas if they're dead, you can discard any of the return stuff if it's dead, you can discard any draw power card. There's a lot of things you can afford to discard that doesn't hurt your resources that much. One card I would definitely not recommend discarding is a psy-frame overload. If you discard this, you lose out on a shed load of control. Like this, the removal this card provides is just ridiculous. It is probably the best card in the deck. Like if psy-frames didn't have this card or something very similar to it, they probably wouldn't be playable. Well, they probably, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, banishing face down is really good. Okay, it targets, which is slightly annoying, but banishing things face down, the only way it comes back ever is through Necroface, and then that's super unreliable, and no one runs Necroface nowadays. So yeah, that's really good. And reason I don't, yeah. And by discarding that, you're losing out on all that good removal, and just the sheer amount of pressure you lose from discarding this, for this is really bad. Okay, if you have an Omega out already, like you've already got an established board presence, then yeah, you can do it. Because you can do the Omega Overload combo where you just infinitely overload banish effect, and then you keep searching. There are some situations where you can do it, but usually it's a bad idea. Yeah, you do get +1, but it's really risky. That is what I'm currently running in the main deck. Other considerations for the main deck would be actual monsters that you can attack with. So the common ones are Wind-Up Rabbit and Yusenju. I do not like either of them. Wind-Up Rabbit I don't like because it's a -1 in a +1 orientated deck, which just feels really bad. Excuse me. It locks out your negates a lot more than you would think it would do because it doesn't banish itself for cost, so it's going to stay on the field actually a lot longer than you would expect it to. So that just gives your opponent a lot more windows where they can do a bunch of stuff. Normally you only do that for one turn, but with Wind-Up Rabbit it's every single turn, which your opponent is going to find a way to abuse that, which I really don't like. Then Yusenju, I also don't like. It feels too inconsistent. You need 2 cards, which in this deck is going to be cloggy. Because, well, with the Yusenjus you need like a 3 and a 1, or a 3 and a 2, or 1 and something else. So you always are reliant on 2 cards. Yes, it is a small engine if you bring it down, but that's going to reduce the consistency even more because you'll just be doing like 1 Yusenju and that will just be useless. Also, Yusenjus can be stopped very easily. For example, if they effect fail your Yusenju, then you can't negate anything on their turn, they can just go off and you can't stop them, which is just really annoying. So yeah, that's why I don't like that. Other considerations would be things like just general traps, so Solemn Warning, Vanities, and Storming. I'm actually considering the Stormings, but I'm not too sure what I'd take out. When Rippling Mirror Force comes out, I'll definitely be running it because you never control any monsters. Rippling Mirror Force might actually knock these guys up a tier or half, which would be very nice. But yeah, it's just because the removal is really good, and psy-frame struggle dealing with full boards. All of your removal is like kill one thing at a time, so it's quite slow. There's no like nuke. Then the Vanities I don't like, because you play this and then you can't negate stuff. Also, you can't get rid of it at will, which is kind of bad. Okay, it does lock your opponent out from doing anything, but that if they just normal summon and they just constantly attack you and this is up, they win. There's nothing that you can do to stop them. the only time I feel this would ever be of any use is if you already have negated some stuff, so you've got like an Omega and a Zeta out, for example. At that point, you probably have enough pressure anyway to be able to win. Or, yeah, I just don't like it. It just locks you out too much, I feel. And the Solemn Warning, I feel it doesn't do enough right now. It's just like one card, which it wrecks pendulums, yes, but if you mistime it or they play around it correctly, it won't do anything. And against so many matchups, it just doesn't do enough, I feel. Also, the life point cost is quite steep, especially with the chicken game and psychic path. I really don't like the extra life point cost. You already take a lot of damage as it is. And as I mentioned before, the deck does struggle with setup boards, so that is why some people run Dark Hole and Regeki. I do kind of agree with this. I'm kind of considering it, but I'm not too sure. It feels kind of slow because there's a spell, and that's just slow in terms of this deck. It might be a good thing to decide in if going second. But I'll have to think about it. You can run it, but I prefer this current build. Also, Destruction, it's not the best type of removal, so Then the extra deck, as I mentioned in my previous video, is essentially 2 Omega, 2 Zeta. Because you can recycle them and whatnot. If you don't know a bunch of the combos, a couple of the combos, I'll go over them straight right now. So if you have 2 Omegas out, you banish 1 Omega, you take a card out of their hand, then during your opponent's standby phase, you return that card you banished with the first Omega with the second Omega's effect. So you take a card out of their hand, banish it, return it to the graveyard. Then during your standby phase, when your Omega comes back, their card stays in the graveyard and you get your synchro back. So this way you can just constantly take cards out of your opponent's hand, which is really good. Only problem with this though is after you've done this, when they enter the main phase, they have priority to do something before you can banish this. So when they enter the main phase, you can't just go banish. You have to wait for them to do an action first, which is kind of annoying. It can prevent you from doing stuff, but other than that, it's pretty good. You can also do a similar thing with the Zeta and the Omega, but that's taking things off the field instead, which can be better, can be worse, because with Zeta, it can clog the field quite easily, so you can't negate stuff. Because you need something in attack position to actually banish, so you can take this off the field. And if you're getting rid of those with this combo, then that's not ideal. Also, putting some monsters to the graveyard can be a bit risky. I can't think of anything right now off the top of my head because I'm useless. But if you put some cards to the graveyard, they will just go, oh, okay, thank you. So you do need to be a little bit careful. Zeta is actually really good for tempo and board control. So if they've already got a board set up, Zeta is a lot better than Omega in my opinion. Omega is really good for just preventing them doing anything in the first place because it takes cards out of their hands so they have less resources to work with. Whereas if you have the Zeta on field, everything that they summon has to be in defense mode. Otherwise, they know that you can just flicker this whenever you feel like, so you just banish it, and then any removal that was targeted its way, you just essentially make them waste, which is really good. So everything they summon will have to be in defense so they can't attack. Even if they go like Castel, it has to be in defense mode, otherwise you'll just laugh and banish it and juke the effect. So yeah, that's really good. Also, the return of this is just silly. If you go like alpha, this, search, this dies, this effect, add alpha, it's just an indefinite plus loop. Okay, it's over a few turns, which is actually quite bad. Don't rely on just the raw constant plus power, but it is nice to be able to do. So yeah, that's basically your extra deck. You don't need 3 or 3 of anything, because if you make 3 of these, well, if you were able to make a third one of these, you've already taken 5 cards out of your opponent's hand. So at that point, they have 1 card usually. So that's not very good. I do have 1 Leo in the extra. This is for emergency teleport combo. So this, if you have field spell out, you play emergency teleport. You summon a level 2, use the field spell effect to synchro, then you get an extra 3100 attack point punch. You can do this in the battle phase, of course. So you go attack, e-tele, synchro, attack. This is actually quite nice. You get an extra 3100 damage, which is very unexpected for psyframes. If you've played psyframes at all, you will know that they really struggle with ending the game. So, because they just can't summon damage during their own turn. The only time they summon during their own turn normally is, it's Card ID or Psychic Field Zone, which summons things in defense. The extra 3100 damage can just shock your opponent and make you win, which is really nice. Then the rest of these synchros you hardly ever make. They're super situational. Basically because most of the time, these are so much better to make. But there are some situations. So the 7s I run is Clear Wing, Black Rose, Other Black Rose. The Clear Wing and the Other Black Rose is basically there because they don't die straight away. You will usually be summoning these during your opponent's turn. So having a little bit of survivability is really key, so you can actually use them to attack or whatever. Otherwise they're just going to die straight away and do nothing. Like if I summoned the Scrap Archfiend, it would just die straight away. And then the Black Rose Dragon, I've never made it, but Black Rosing during your opponent's turn is kind of disgusting. However, I really don't like going into it. Like, whenever I'm considering going into this, I'll go, oh, if I go drop this, I will lose my Overload and I will lose my Field Spell. That could be a ton of pressure that I can't use. If you make it off of an Alpha and you can search the Field Spell, or you've got another one in hand, or your opponent's superly overcommitted to the board, and you've got like an Omega or a Zeta coming back, then yeah, Black Rose is a fine option, but it's very unlikely your opponent will just play into that. So yeah, that's why it's very rarely made. And again, it destroys things, which isn't very good. Then level 8s, I have the Scarlight and the Hot Red Dragon. These both clear boards. So this is kind of like Regeki, in that it just nukes your opponent's front row, but again, you'll have to summon this during your opponent's turn most of the time. So it's probably going to die if there's anything worth clearing, it will probably die. So, unless you summon it during main phase 2 somehow. But, yeah, they're there. They have the situation. And Crimson Blade, this is just felt like couldn't think of what to put in here. One troll thing you can do is have 8 extra deck, because there are some Monarch players that have 8 in their extra deck. So you could make your opponent think you're playing Monarch if you're going second. But it's unlikely, because with psyframes you do reveal your deck very quickly. Then Scrap Dragon is here because it can kill itself, basically. So its entire purpose is just summon, kill yourself, kill something else. It just takes it off the board, which is nice because you can then negate more stuff. So that's why it's Scrap Dragon. To be honest, the rest of the level 8s aren't used at all. Then the Spark Dragon and the Thought Ruler. These don't die straight away, that's why they're here. Similar concept to Clearing and the Black Rose Moonlight. Then the Chimera Tech is here for Cosmo matchups, and I side Dragon, so yeah. The Chimera Tech should be pretty self-explanatory. Other considerations for extra deck, you can play a third Omega or Zeta if you find you're just never going into the rest of them. I don't have money for a third Omega, so I'm not going to make it. I'm going to play it. Something I would definitely put in is the Overmind Archfiend. This allows you to use Field Zone to return Omegas, which is basically its entire purpose, just being level 9, and the fact that its effect is better than the other one. I forget what it's called. But the return effect is really difficult to use because you summon it in defense mode, so that's kind of useless. You've got to wait for a turn before you can attack with it. And then if it gets to attack, it's probably going to either die or be dead by the time you're able to do that. So it's just really unlikely to be useful. If you can get 2 banishes with the effect, and then when it dies you get a Omega or something for free because you can synchro with the field spell immediately, that can be really good. But it's just really unlikely to pull off. Reason your Omega would be banished is because if you're forced to banish it with Overload, that can be a situation. So yeah, it's just there for, it would just be there for being a level 9 and Psychic Field Zone being a card. And then Stardust Dragon, I am definitely going to be putting this in because it's really good into Draco Pals. You can stop a lot of their shenanigans, however they play things. I think this is going to be more disruptive than Omega, to be honest, because it stops Wavering Eyes, it stops all the scale shenanigans with the Draco engine. It also takes itself off board, which I think this is the only level 8 synchro I think that does that, apart from Omega, which I quite like. So I'm definitely going to be putting this in. You can mess around with the other synchros, they're never really relevant because you just never go into them. You can also put more Chimera attacks in if you want more Cyber Dragon type power. But that's all considerations for the extra deck. So then, side deck, I'm actually going to show you what I sided. So against Cosmo, I sided in the 2 Lancia because you can stop them from banishing stuff and just going off. 2 Cyber Dragon because when you make Chimera attack, you don't destroy them, so they don't get any of the spaceship effects. 2 System Down, same reason, Cyber Dragon, but this also prevents them using Core of the Haunted, so this is better than this, although it does cost life points. And if they have Cosmo Town, they'll be able to add whatever they feel like back, so it's not... I like 2 and 2. Lose 1 turn, this is here to prevent them just OTKing. It slows them down a lot. It does slow you down slightly because when you synchro summon, the monster has to go in defense mode and its effects negated. So that's kind of annoying, but it's not too bad. Then the 1 Iron Wall, this isn't the same reason as Lancia, but this is just permanent, and if they can't out this straight away, then you can just win straight off basically. So if they go like MST and you delta it, and they don't have any other form of removal, you can just win straight away. Another cool thing you can do with Lancia and Wall is you can use it to prevent your own psyframes from being banished by their own effects if you don't have Veil Spell, for example. So you can go like, okay, Lancia during draw phase, standby phase, whatever. Then go, okay, attack, beta, and then you should be able to recover from that quite nicely. And then, yeah, and then what I sided out was, it was the 2 Twin Twisters, because they don't have enough back row targets to warrant running it. The only things that you could hit is Solemn, which you have to hit blindly, and at that point you run the risk of hitting Core of the Haunted, at which point you just go minus really badly. You could also hit Emergency Teleport, which it just doesn't, there's not enough back row that this can actually destroy to warrant running. Mystical Space Typhoon would be a better option because you can actually destroy the Core of the Haunted as it, like, chaining to it, but with the Twin Twisters, because of the double target, it's not that good. Then I side out the Emergency Teleport, the Psychic Field Zone, and the Psychic Path. This is because against Cosmo you need to open Optimal, and you can just take this out quite easily. They're not core to the deck, but it's kind of like backup. See, I sided out. I also side out 1 Upstart Goblin. I needed something else to side out, and I didn't want to take any chicken games out because I like terraforming. Then I also took out 1 Delta. They just have less spells to negate than most decks do. Cosmo Town can't be negated. They're Mystical Space Typhoons. They usually play around your monsters. Yeah, that's why I took this out. There's just less spells to negate than most decks. So that's what I started out versus Cosmo. Most of my side, it's... well, most times I side out, it will be like an Emergency Teleport, 2 Psychic Path, maybe a Delta, maybe Twin Twisters, maybe 1 Overload if from immunity targeting or something. You can usually find a few cards to pull out. I don't recommend taking out any of the gears or any other gears unless they just don't attack at all. So you could take Beta out if they never attack, or if they never summon, take Alpha out. But most decks don't do that. I can't think of decks that do it off the top of my head. But if they're weird and they just don't run into certain gears, take the gears they don't run into. Just get rid of them. Dead cards are dead. Then the rest of my side is 2 Shut Imprisoning Mirror for Burning Abyss. I have 2 Wire Tap for Burning Abyss and any other trap heavy deck, because this interrupting a Solemn Strike is really good because they think they're safe, but they're not. So it's just really good. The amount of times this card has saved me is ridiculous. Then Mask Restrict versus Monarchs, this card is insane. You just laugh at them. And you just negate their Upstart Goblin to get a monster on board. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is really good. As you can see, I usually only side in 2 to 4 cards. So siding out isn't too much of a problem. I also side in lose 1 turns against other aggro decks, but there aren't that many of those. So any OTK style deck, for example. Just gonna shift that so you can't see my carpet. So that's my side deck. Other considerations for the side deck. Again, you could side Regeki, you could side Solemn, you could side Vanities. I was considering putting in the 3rd lose 1 turn and Cyber Dragon, but I didn't want to tunnel in too hard on the Cosmo matchup because this doesn't do that much, to be honest. And I might take this out actually. And I only had the 1 camera attack. Also, again, tunneling onto the Cosmo matchup, I was kind of running out of side deck space. So yeah, you can also side Epsilon, but there are very few matchups where it's going to be useful. I believe that is it. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it if you've made it this far. I know this is a long video, but I want this to be detailed. So I will be taking this deck to my locals. I will be changing the extra deck slightly to include the Cyber Dragon and the Overmind Archfiend, and I will be posting some game analyses for you. Analyses? I don't know. So I'll be doing the same thing I've done here, but I'll be talking about my game decisions, where I made mistakes, where my opponent made mistakes, what I could have done better. So hopefully that will teach you guys how you can play the deck, and this is and this video is going to help you build your deck. So yeah, thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.